morning, everyone. This hearing is called to order. This is a public hearing of the Legislative Oversight Committee. My name is Councilman Kenyatta Johnson, Chair of the committee. A quorum is present with Councilwoman Helen Gim, Councilman Brian O'Neill, Councilman Derek Green, and Councilman Blondell Reynolds Brown. Will the clerk please read the title of the resolution?
Resolution number 160281, entitled Authorizing the Legislative Oversight Committee to conduct public hearings to examine the executive branch's enforcement of Bill number 100011-A, lead paint disclosure.
I want to first start off by thanking Councilwoman Blondell Reynolds Brown for bringing this hearing forward. I want to also thank Councilwoman Helen Gim for her hard work and dedication on addressing this issue of lead and making sure that we have quality water and making sure our young people and our residents in our city, are safe as relates to the quality of water we are drinking. So at this particular time, I'm going to turn over. Actually, now my wife is asking the question, like, is it safe to drink the water? Because I have a 18-month-old son. And so I'm going to turn this hearing over to...
I have to admit, there is an irony here. For years, we dealt with lead-based paint. Mm-hmm. And it's still an issue, but it largely has had a lot of attention. And people would say, well, what do I do? They'd say, well, when you get rid of it, use water-based paint, latex paint. Mm-hmm. Well, now we have an issue with lead-based water.
Wow.
Which is a kind of reverse of lead-based paint.
Understood.
Which is, I don't think anybody ever foresaw.
I may be promoting Deer Park this moment forward. And so
we've had a long week.
I want to turn the hearing over to Councilwoman Blondell Reynolds Brown.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for building us into your schedule this morning. To my Chairman, Kenyatta Johnson, and the members of the Legislative Oversight Committee, and to the administration, and to partners in this effort, thank you again for stepping away from your lives and joining us at this important hearing. The bottom line is this: there is no safe blood lead level. There is no safe blood lead level. Lead exposure occurs with no obvious symptoms and disproportionately affects low-income and minority children. Children who are exposed to lead are at risk of damage to the brain and the nervous system, slowed growth and development, which of course impacts their academic achievement, learning and behavioral problems, and hearing and speech problems. To this end, in 2010, my office worked hand in glove with Shelley Yanoff of PCCY and the leadership and membership of the Homeowners Association of Philadelphia, and for 2 years met examining this issue, leading to a 7-hour hearing, December of 2011, to tackle the issue of lead paint in apartment dwellings. And I salute the partners in this effort, because we would not have ended up where we did without the input, regular input, of members of HAPCO and PCCY. While the debate at times was heated, in the end, we were able to reach a win-win scenario and pass Bill number 100011-A, Philadelphia's current lead paint disclosure law. This hearing today will focus on the enforcement side of the lead paint disclosure bill, the reasons for our current lack of enforcement, which has been raised, and what the city should do in the future to make sure this law is being adhered to. I also want to thank Community Legal Services, who were generous partners in that debate during the 2010-2011 discussions. Again, thank you to Chairman Johnson, and a salute to Councilwoman Gim, who has again put the issue of lead on the radar screen, specifically as it exists in our water supply. This week, we had a press conference, a number of members of council, again tackling the issue of lead as it exists in our water supply. And so we have a lot of work to do towards that end. Thank you to the administration for the continuing work with my office as we move forward to strengthen how we better protect our children from the dangers of lead. And with that, we'll proceed with the proceedings. Mr. Chairman.
Councilwoman Gill.
Thank you very much, and I want to say to Mr. Chair, thank you very much for the space for this hearing, and also especially to my colleague, Councilwoman Blondell Reynolds-Brown. If there is anyone who has been the face of leadership on the issue of lead poisoning and how we can ensure the safety of our families, it would be yourself, Councilwoman Brown, because you've led on this issue when before Flint, before Newark, before a lot of the consciousness around what happens when we neglect infrastructure on such a level really came to the forefront that it did. I do want to point out for my colleagues and for the audience out there that in January, a national publication published a headline asking the question, Philly is worse than Flint. And in terms of water testing and safety procedures, Councilwoman Reynolds-Brown, myself, and Councilwoman Cindy Bass really took this on as a very serious issue. We held a number of hearings on it, and last week, or yesterday, introduced a package of bills that really tackled the issue of testing, expanded testing, and ensuring that children, especially in our daycare, in our child care centers, in our schools, and in their homes, whether rented or owned, will be assured that we do expansive testing and understanding of lead levels in water. And in part due to that, that same publication came out yesterday with a headline that said, these set of proposals could put Philadelphia at the forefront in the nation in terms of water testing efforts. And what we're trying to say is we are not going to solve a 50-year-old problem like lead poisoning overnight, but we are reinvigorating attention to this issue. We are dedicating ourselves to trying to do better about expansive testing, about understanding what the impact is, and that we will take action in the best ways that we can. So I thank everybody and the council, and my city council colleagues, because it's an honor to be in a space where we can make that happen. Thank you.
I would also like to acknowledge the presence of Councilman Bobby Heenan. Will the clerk please call the first witness?
Dr. Caroline C. Johnson, Acting Deputy Health Commissioner, Philadelphia Department of Public Health.
Good morning.
Can you please read your name for the record, and you can start your testimony. Thank you for being here today.
You're welcome. Good morning. I am Dr. Caroline Johnson. I'm the Acting Deputy Commissioner for the Philadelphia Department of Public Health. And thank you very much for the opportunity to present testimony today on resolution number 160281, authorizing the Legislative Oversight Committee to conduct public hearings to examine the executive branch's enforcement of Bill number 10011A, lead paint disclosure law. Protecting children from exposure to lead is important to lifelong good health, was just mentioned by the councilwoman. The effects of lead exposure cannot be corrected. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention have determined that while there is no safe level of lead, that children under age 6 who have blood lead levels of 5 to 9 micrograms per deciliter should be targeted for primary prevention, and children with blood lead levels of above 10 should receive education, inspection, and home remediation services, which is done by the Health Department's Lead and Healthy Homes program. Fortunately, the percentage of children with elevated blood lead levels in Philadelphia has been declining and continues to decline. Among children being tested for lead between the ages of 0 and 5 years, the proportion with a level of 10 or above has declined from 12% in 2004 to 1.2% in 2015. However, many children in Philadelphia continue to be exposed to lead. When the health department investigates the environment of a child with a high lead level, the source is nearly always in the home residence in the form of chipping and peeling paint. Although lead-containing paint has been banned since 1978 in Philadelphia, we still have many homes that have surfaces covered with leaded paint. with approximately 1/4 of Philadelphia's young children thought to be living in rental properties, the lead paint disclosure law was intended to prevent lead exposure by requiring landlords to identify and mitigate lead risks such as peeling paint in those properties where children under 6 years of age live. In brief, the law states that a leaser should not enter into a lease agreement unless he or she provides the tenant and the health department with a valid certification stating that the property is lead-free or lead-safe, and that the lessee acknowledges receipt of the certificate by signing a copy. However, enforcement of this law is difficult, given the fact that many landlords are not licensed, and among those licensed, it is not known in which units children reside. Of the approximate 80,000 licensed rental properties in Philadelphia, the Health Department has received 1,600 lead-free or lead-safe certificates to date. We suspect that this number vastly underestimates the number of rental properties in which young children live, and that there's a lot more work we could do. Recent attention to the issue of childhood lead poisoning has prompted the Health Department's new leadership to take a hard look at what we can do better to protect Philadelphia's children. Not only do we want to better serve children who we find have elevated lead levels, but we also want to initiate actions that will prevent exposure in the first place. Better enforcement of the lead paint disclosure law will help serve that purpose. Programs have already been set in motion that will coordinate with the Department of L&I to modify the rental application license to better capture information about lead risk in the property. If lead certificates are required but not provided, L&I will not renew the rental license. We've also developed programs to inform landlords of the responsibility to comply with the lead paint disclosure law by providing information through the mail and in association with the licensing process. We are just about to launch a public information and advertising campaign to advise renters who are parents of young children of their right to a lead-safe environment. Families are instructed as to whom they can call for assistance if they have not been provided with a lead-safe certificate by their landlord. This program should be launching next week in public venues. We also are planning to identify children who are living in rental properties where a lead-safe or lead-free certificate has not been submitted, and encourage or mandate that landlords comply with the law. And in addition, we will continue to identify all children who have elevated lead levels and either require that the landlords remediate their homes of lead, or we will do the remediation ourselves. Preventing lead poisoning among children in Philadelphia is a great priority to the Health Department, and we are eager to improve enforcement of the lead paint disclosure law, and really do welcome any suggestions or comments you have that are going to help us do that. And I'm happy to answer any questions at this time.
Good morning, and thank you.
Sure.
So, for clarity to your testimony, so you're telling us that the lead poisoning media campaign has started?
Next week.
Oh, next week.
Next week. It is, by the way, this is the ad. I don't know if you've seen it, but this is what we'll run. And it is due to start Monday, June 13th, and will run through August 13th.
Okay. Do you believe the health commissioner might entertain a letter signed by both he and I to the municipal court system registering exactly what you have recommended here? Asking the courts to have a role in this process when it comes to identifying landlords who may not be in compliance?
I think he'd be very eager to do that. He's in full agreement that we need to enforce this law.
Okay. And just one more. I guess it might be helpful to hear from L&I for them to speak to what more they can do with regards to identifying landlords who may not be in compliance. You care to restate for the record what you believe a possible remedy might be towards that end?
As the health department?
Yes.
So we met with L&I, and one of the plans is on the application, the license application. It is going to be edited that it will specifically state that the home was built before or after 1978, because the risk is in homes that were built before 78.
Absolutely.
It will specifically ask whether there is an intent to have children who are less than 6 years of age reside in the house, and then it will ask specifically whether the lead certification, the lead inspection and certification of being lead-free has been obtained. And I believe the current plan is that they will not approve the license unless the landlord answers those correctly.
And that's due to be effective when?
Well, that's still in the works. I think they're reviewing the form to make sure that they can actually implement this, but I don't have a timeline for that.
Okay, so that is to suggest then that there is an intentional effort between L&I and the Department of Health to work as partners until that particular item is fully addressed.
That is correct.
Okay then, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I want to also acknowledge the presence of Councilwoman Sherelle Parker. Councilwoman Gim.
Hi, good morning. So one of my questions is to have a little bit of better understanding about the health department's role around the approach to enforcement currently. And could you clarify to me again, your role is to be presented with a valid certification, is that right? And also, they're twofold. I believe that if a child's identified as being lead poisoned, then you, as a health department, will enter into that child's primary residence?
Correct.
And check for lead paint?
Correct. So it really is sort of two ways. There's the children who have an elevated lead level and the actions we take, and then there are the children who are not elevated or have not yet been tested yet. And so to talk about the children with an elevated lead level, they are programmatically what we've been targeting for the last 20 years. We get reports on all of the lead levels that are obtained on children in Philadelphia. If they reach a certain level, then we enact our response program. And our response program is that the Lead in Healthy Homes program goes into the home, conducts an inspection, both visually and actual physical test, to determine if there is lead in that household. And it's 99% or more likely that there's lead in the household. So when we do these inspections, we virtually always find lead in the home. And at that point, if it's a rental property, we work with the person who's renting the property as well as the landlord to say this lead has to be removed from this house. And sometimes they do it willingly and sometimes they don't. If they do not willingly deal with the lead in the house, then we take them to court. And there's something known as the lead court. We've had at least a dozen years in Philadelphia where we pursue these landlords and try to get these homes fixed. And if the landlord will not fix them, then we fix them ourselves and try to collect the costs from the landlord.
And this is on behalf of the health department?
This is all the health department doing all of this.
So given that, could you just walk me through a couple of questions that I had? So if a child tests positive for lead in, say, a rental property, do you then double check and see whether the landlord has filed the disclosure certification?
That's correct, and we checked. I looked at the 2015 data. We had 92 children who were in rental properties who were lead poisoned, and only 2 of the 92 had submitted a lead certificate. So we have evidence that 99% or whatever that 90 of 92, whatever that comes to, is the percent that are not complying with the law.
Right, not complying with the law. I think that helps a little bit. And how many violations would you say have been issued annually since this procedure went into effect? I assume in 2012, is that right?
The law was passed in 22, but I think there was there was a 1 year before it was enforced. So we have not penalized anyone for not providing a certificate unless the child has been lead poisoned, in which case they go to court. So we do not necessarily know in which house a child under 6 is living. So that's why we have been focusing on children with the elevated lead levels, because they're the ones that are reported to us with their home address, and we can look up whether they have a lead certificate. But if there is no test or no information that a child is living in a residence, we don't know that the lead certificate is missing.
So is it fair to assume that the 1,600 properties that you named that is being lead-free are 1,600, 1,596 properties are ones that in which you have certificates in hand? You know,
Yes.
because of the certificate.
Yes, and those were the landlords who proactively did this. They're not ones that we went after as a penalty. They were, let's just say, those were the good landlords who took this seriously and went out and did what they needed to do.
But the 99% of children who are actually been lead poisoned live with or in rental properties with landlords that have neglected to follow the law.
That is our suspicion.
Based on what we've done.
Yes, based on what we know, that's a good
And would you
likelihood.
say that those 92 children, I mean, are those the ones that you're counting in terms of how many violations have been issued over the last several years?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And so violations are based on after a child has been poisoned, actually?
At this point, that is correct.
Not proactively before?
That is correct.
So there could be more?
Oh, yes.
And have you collected any fines, or what kinds of fines have you been able to collect?
Do you mind if I ask some of my colleagues to come up? Paulette, do you have? This is Paulette Smith. She is the manager of the Lead and Healthy Homes program.
Good morning.
And she knows a fair amount about the lead court and the enforcement of actions for children that have been lead poisoned.
And I think, is it procedure to say that we still have to ask you to introduce yourself, state your name and your title for the
Yes, for
record?
the record, yes.
My name is Paulette Smith. I'm the Program Administrator, Lead and Healthy Homes Program.
The question was, how many violations have been issued since the law went into effect?
Anytime a case goes in front of a judge for a child who has an elevation, and we know that the property does not have the lead-safe or lead-free certificate, it is brought to the attention of the judge, and the judge takes this into consideration for each individual case.
Okay. And I have a few more questions, but I would like to come back after my colleagues go. I don't want to take up all the time, but I think one of my central issues that when I come back to ask you about is, you know, I think our goal and the actual challenge is going to be how we can somehow get to children before they're actually poisoned here. And that's a major issue, especially given the neglect on behalf of so many landlords in which they are in existence. So I will come back.
Councilman Derek Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank Councilwomen Brown and Gim for using this opportunity of legislative oversight to continue to investigate the process in reference to the lead paint issue as impacted people in the city of Philadelphia. As many people know, Councilman Tasco was a co-sponsor of that initial legislation and was also a longtime chair of Public Health and Human Services and spent a significant amount of time on addressing the issue of lead paint and the impact of children in the city of Philadelphia. Dr. Johnson, looking at your testimony, you talked about approximately 80,000 licensed rental properties in the city of Philadelphia, and the health department has received about 1,600 lead-free or lead-safe certifications to date. However, in your testimony, you stated how this vastly underestimates the number of rental properties in which young children live. And toward the end of your testimony, you talked about a marketing campaign in reference to trying to inform parents, caregivers, and providers regarding the impact of lead paint. And I think from my perspective, my concern is that historically issues like lead paint, we have short bursts of information and communication, but we don't have a sustained type of marketing program or information program to let parents know about the impacts of lead paint, especially considering that the city of Philadelphia has a very old housing stock. So what steps have you taken? I believe your marketing campaign goes through August, but what steps have you taken to work with some of the organizations that have been involved in this issue over the years, like a HAPCO, like a TURN, to continue that process of community engagement, not just for that short marketing period?
Right. You're absolutely right. I think informing parents, especially new parents, about lead and lead risks is an ongoing responsibility. And our current plan that we're considering is that we will work with every family for whom we have a birth certificate, so that when a child is born in Philadelphia, that we will mail to their house some information about lead poisoning, about what rights they have if they're in a rental property, and make sure that they're aware of how to contact us, how to contact legal aid if that's what they need. And so we're going to try to get as much information out to them early as we can. We actually used to do the kind of a welcome baby package before that included lead information. And, to be honest, the interest in lead sort of faded away over the last decade, as did the funding. And so some of these programs were lost, and only the recent events of Flint and water brought lead back to the forefront. So I think that's a program that's probably well worth it. It's the cost of a stamp. And in addition to direct mailing to parents of newly born children, so I think working with the providers, and that can consist of all the agencies you named, nonprofit organizations that serve young families in the city, as well as all of the healthcare providers. I mean, we know that most infants in the first year of life make it to a pediatrician or a family doctor or some other clinician, and they probably have the most direct and hands-on and trusted interaction with the child in that first year of life. So I think working with the providers in the city to remind them, lead is still here, and that you really need to talk to your families about lead, about the homes they're living in, and what needs to be done to correct any problems in that home.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, that you somewhat read my mind, because I'm currently working with the Philadelphia Autism Project in reference to early intervention, and as part of our outreach, we're looking at doing a peer-to-peer type of initiative with physicians, especially primary care physicians, for those first wellness visits to let parents know about the issues of autism and the early warning signs. And I think because of the issues with Flint, Michigan, and the hearings that have been held in council, and the heightened awareness that people have in reference to lead, letting people know, yes, lead is still an issue, and maybe even in your information, it's not just lead paint, but also the fact that, because we do have such an old infrastructure, we have people that have the lead pipes that come into their homes, and that the water may be okay, but it's the means that the water is coming into your home through a piping system that may have lead in it that causes some additional problems. So I think maybe considering that in your marketing campaign in reference to lead, not just lead paint, but also in reference to the laterals that you have coming to your home, may also could be an issue that can contribute to the lead issue, as well as you said, reaching out to primary care physicians and working with some of the great medical institutions we have here in the city of Philadelphia as a way to get information out through those providers as well.
I agree completely. Thank you.
Councilwoman Gill?
Two very quick questions. One, if you're a low-income resident who wants lead testing for the home, either a renter or homeowner occupied, are there opportunities to do free or reduced price lead testing?
Are you talking about lead testing in the home or lead testing of the child?
Lead testing in the home.
Lead testing in the home. So
I'm trying to get to children before they're poisoned.
So the department has capacity to actually do the lead testing. They use this XRF gun, I believe that it's called, and we go in and they zap it or something and determine whether there's lead there, and they do white tests. So I think that it's certainly within our capacity to do it, and I don't see any reason that we couldn't accommodate specific requests if people needed us to go into the home and test for lead.
So one of the other questions I had is, if a child is tested for being lead poisoned or having elevated lead levels, which I just called lead poisoning, in a rental property, would you consider appropriate to send a note to all tenants of that property that this property has been identified in at least one location to have had, been in violation of the lead paint disclosure law? We recommend that you test. And, has that been explored at all? I mean, this, especially if the landlord in particular is one of those 99% that is in clear violation of lead certification and has not remediated of that property, has not provided disclosure. Is it possible that at least for those families and for those households, that is something that we can proactively do?
So I can say right now, if there are other residents within the same unit,
Yes.
then the lead program will make sure that they're tested and the prevention and education is given to the whole family. So anyone within the household is dealt with. Your question, I think, is more about if there are two apartments
The building.
in
The landlord
same
is in
building.
violation of the entire certificate of the building, right? So the building, I assume that the lead certification and program requires that the building be done
This is actually a problem for us. We're just learning is that there's only one license. So
Sure.
if you're a landlord with 50 apartments, you only submit one license.
Sure, but the assumption is that you are responsible therefore for all 50 units within that building.
Correct, which
Yes.
really means that
Thus,
you need
if-
50 certificates to go with your one license.
To some extent,
So-
although I personally feel...
Point of information. So let's allow L&I to come to the table, because I don't want us to get waddled down in a mire that we're not going to resolve today anyway.
Okay.
I think some of those questions might be more appropriate for L&I to come to the table after we've heard from our next set of witnesses.
Sure.
Just to move this along, because the bottom line is we're not resolving this today. The intent was to get more information on the record because of the new revelation that we're not where we need to be or where we should be as a city. And so we want to get information today, which will have to be followed by a subsequent summary of the testimony with instruction on how we proceed forward.
Sure, thank you very much, Councilwoman.
Okay,
And
well,
I just
I will
wanted...
just answer Councilwoman Jim's. I do not believe that we assess the neighboring apartments to know who the landlord is or give them any specific issue.
And I think one of the question that I was trying to seed out was this question that there is one certification for the whole building. Thus, to me, the landlord is responsible for all units within that property.
Yes.
If they are in violation of, one, having poisoned a child, at least one that we know of, and two, not having a valid certification or disclosure, would it be a possibility or appropriate venue to then inform all the tenants of that building that a child has been poisoned on property, elevated lead levels, however we want to put it, but more importantly, we recommend that you test.
I think it's reasonable. We could not violate any confidences and name who it is, but I think if we had a suspicion that a building with multiple units was a problem, we could, in general, notify them that we believe there's a problem in the building.
Right.
Yes.
Well, clearly, it's just not that there's a problem, but that this landlord is in violation, does not have a registered
Yes.
valid
Yes.
certificate, is in violation of that, a child has been poisoned on property, thus,
Yes.
we are informing you of your rights. Thank
I
you.
think so.
Will the clerk please call the next witness? Next.
Harvey Spear and Daryl Zaslow.
And also can Phil Lord from the Tenant Union Representative Network please come on up at the same time?
sit with us. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. My name is Darrell Zaslow. I am legal counsel to HAPCO, the Homeowners Association of Philadelphia. We are an organization comprised of property owners, owners of rental property. It is our association and our members who are responsible to this bill. The enactment of the bill back in 2012 was a milestone. Lead safety for children was improved and should have been improved and improved more. HAPCO was privileged to be a big part of the enactment of this bill. And now it is our obligation from our perspective to be a part of this enforcement process. And we are here today for that purpose. The establishment of legal requirements having been duly enacted, compliance with the standards is important and it's mandatory. There is no question about that for the health of children. The resolution of council calling for this hearing recites what appears to be a relatively low number of lead certifications compared to the total number of rental units in the city. And this is certainly cause for your examination. Under the best of circumstances, it would appear to be an unavoidable conclusion that adherence to the lead certification law has been insufficient. There are several relevant factors which we would suggest. First of all, if you'll forgive some mathematics. Of the reputed 248,000 housing units, only a certain percentage of them apply to children 6 and under. So when you say 248,000 housing units, those are not housing units with children 6 and under, those are all the housing units. In senior housing, in student housing, and other stages of city life, there are many, many apartments, the majority, that do not have children age 6 and under. That would be a helpful statistic to know, and I don't know that statistic. I don't know if anybody does. There are other reductions in this number of 248,000, those units which are constructed since 1978 and not subject to the law, and that would be helpful to know as well. PHA apartments, which are not subject to the law, that would be helpful to know the number that we have a better handle on. And lastly, there's many tenants that remain in their properties for years and years. People don't live in their property for 8 months or a year and leave. Many people stay in their housing for many years. Now, if you'll forgive me, I want to go through some numbers just to try to put it on the record. In 2013, there were 131,000 students in the school district. The charter schools were another 60,000. So the total number of students, and I'm no expert on this, I'm taking it off the school district's website, 192,000 students would appear to be in the city of Philadelphia. And if school ranges from age 5 to 18, again, I'm using numbers, I'm not a statistician, but that's the number, is 13 years. So if you take the 13 different ages of the students in Philadelphia schools, you divide 192,000 students by 13 classes of students, age 5 to 18, it would seem mathematically that there are 14,000 and some students of each age, 14,000 5-year-olds, 14,000 6-year-olds. So now we're looking to know how many children in the city are age 6 and under. So if you take that number of 14,779 and you multiply it by 6, so we'll see that there are potentially 80,000 80,000 children in the city of Philadelphia who are age 6 and under. 40% of them live in rental units, 60% perhaps live in owner-occupied properties. So this would indicate that the 40% of the 80,000 children who are subject to the law is 35,000 children. There's 35,000 children impacted by the law. And again, I'm making assumptions here, you'll forgive me, but I think there's a basis for it. If we say that there are 2 children per family, 2 children, 6 and under, in any family, so the 35,000 children 6 and under, there would be 17,000 rental units that they live in. I think that that is a starting point for discussion. Now, of those 17,000 housing units, which contain children 6 and under, a certain percentage of them are PHA. PHA has their own rules, their own regulations. They inspect, they do their number. The law specifically exempts that, so we're not looking for the PHA units. And another percentage of it, which I do not know, but it's increasing because Philadelphia is improving with so much nice new housing. So there's a certain number of the units which are post-78 housing and also not subject to the law. So if you add all that in, and I made up a number, I said I'm guessing that half of the units are either PHA or new, leaving half of these 17,000 rental units which house children age 6 and under in private rental properties. Now, that half number is 8,800 units. It's a speculation on my part. There are experts who know better than we do. They can correct half of these numbers. But using that as a starting point, looking at 8,800 units which are impacted by the law, the number of 1,596 tests, completely unacceptable. It's not, it should be 8,800. It is not. But 8,800 is not 248,000. So it just doesn't appear to be as wildly out of whack as it might appear at first blush, looking at the shocking number of 248,000, 1,500 comply. The number seems to me to be 8,000 and 1,500 complied. Unacceptable. I'm not in any way saying it's okay. It just is not as bad as it sounded originally. Now, HAPCO, upon receipt of this resolution that was introduced, we have already commenced a recharged notification program to our property owners. In our newsletter, on our website, our educational programs, our communications with property owners. And I will tell you that sitting here listening to Dr. Johnson's testimony and reading Mr. Lord's testimony and Mr. Gould's testimony, I'm not contemplating now, I'm going to do it. I sat here and I reread the penalty provisions of this law, which I have a hand in writing. And let me tell you, they are powerful and shocking. I'm going to let our property owners know that there are such severe penalties already within the law for owners who don't comply that we're the landlords, we better watch out, because the law is powerfully prepared to fine, punish. There's 6, 7, or 8 different punishments that the city now has by virtue of Councilman Blondell Reynolds Brown that was enacted back then. So when I said in my testimony as I wrote it, we are educating our people, I'm going to educate them all right, that they are in danger. And they better comply or else, because out of this hearing is not going to come anything but demands for full compliance with some teeth in it. Now, not every property owner in Philadelphia is a HAPCO member. We wish that they were. The problem from our perspective, and Dr. Johnson mentioned it in her testimony, is landlord licenses. The failure to obtain a landlord license is the critical component. 248,000 housing units, and Dr. Johnson's testimony says 80,000 licensed properties. I think that's an accurate number. We have 168,000 housing units that are not properly licensed. I think half of them may be PHA. There's 50,000 PHA. Whatever the number is, there are tens of thousands, 100,000 or more rental units in this city which are not licensed. That hurts us because our good people who get a license and try to comply are competing with fly-by-night property owners who are not getting licensed. And by not getting licensed, they are dodging you. Now, we have suggested over the years, and I'm going to take the liberty of doing so again, some strategies to correct that. It's very simple. Well, it's simple for me to say it. L&I has to do it. But I don't think it's that complicated. Number one, compare the name of the customer on a water bill with the name of the owner of the property as listed in the Recorder of Deeds office. It's not a match. If the Recorder of Deeds says this person owns it, and the Water Department says this person is getting the bill, the person getting the bill is a tenant. more likely than not. So match that up. And if there's no license, no housing inspection license, nab them, penalize them, and impose licensure on that owner. In the same vein, compare the name of the customer receiving a PGW bill with the name of the owner of the property in the Recorder of Deeds office. If the person who's paying the gas bill, a lot of times it is the landlord on the water bill and the gas bill, but a lot of times it's not. The gas bill and the water bill goes into the tenant's name frequently. So if the name on the water bill or the gas bill is not the same as the owner of record in the Recorder of Deeds, in all likelihood, it is a rental property. Now, we have suggested a very simple educational process, and that would be the following statement, which should be printed on every tax bill, it should be printed on every water bill, it should be printed on every gas bill. And I've written out a suggested language, which I took from testimony at this table years ago. The City of Philadelphia requires that all rental properties be licensed with a housing inspection license. If this property is tenant-occupied and does not have a housing inspection license, the owner is in violation of the law. To see if the property is licensed or not, go to phila.gov. It's right there on the main page, license, and you check it. We had previously proposed this. Councilman Heenan, upon our request, actually introduced a bill to get this sentence on city literature going out to owners. And it never saw the light of day. It never happened. We were told something about, like, there's not enough ink to put it on the paper, or there's not enough room on the tax bill to put in these two sentences. I don't know why, but that's what happened. So correction of this licensure issue is really a significant matter. I want to comment on two other thoughts. Number one, we again reiterate our sense and our concern that the focus of all of this being on landlords is only looking at half the problem. If your targets, and targets is the wrong word, it sounds pejorative, but if the subjects of this law are all parents who have children 6 and under, and you are to implement a requirement for every property with children 6 and under is lead safe, it would seem to us that that's going to solve a lot of other problems. If half the children in the city live in rental properties, why are those children ignored? And you're honing in on the landlords to comply, but not going to mom and dad in the house and saying, your house, you own it, but you still need to comply, and you should. And that will also help, because when those people sell their house and perhaps an investor buys it, there's already been some activity to make it lead safe. If you have my testimony, I want to highlight the last page of, and Councilman Gim, you had suggested that the problem cannot be solved overnight. And we suggest to you that it can. And the way that it can be solved overnight is because this problem of lead paint is a problem which can be solved by money. There's so many social ills that we deal with, that you as a council deal with, that you can throw billions of dollars at it, it's not going to solve the problem. But the lead paint problem can be solved with money. If we had money to correct all the lead infestation and have it removed, the problem would be solved. So where do you get the money? I recognize it's not a good time for a council. You're struggling with budgets and you're struggling with new taxes, so this is not a good time to propose a new tax. But we proposed it before at this table, and I'm going to do it again, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. The problem of lead in paint, the lead in the pipes, lead everywhere can be solved and removed and the children protected by appropriating money for that purpose. And we suggested in the state legislature, I've been in Harrisburg, I don't know how many times, with this concept, and I've sat at this table with this concept, but maybe now that you've fought the sugar wars and you appear poised, that you're going to be impacting or implementing a tax of $1.92 per gallon of soda. That's my calculation. If the newspaper's reporting is correct, that you're charging $0.015 per ounce and 128 ounces in a gallon, you are charging $1.92 a gallon for sugar drinks. I know we're talking about lead. I know that. My point is that, and the sugar's worse than the lead, though I shouldn't say that. I wouldn't drink a soda to save my life. But $1.92 on a gallon of soda, 50 cents a gallon of paint. The paint manufacturers caused this problem. I always say it here. My father I just lost him, he should rest in peace. My father kept every single receipt from M.A. Bruder & Sons Paint in your district, Councilman Kenyatta, where my father spent his entire career. And he saved every single one. He bought so much paint from that paint company, and they didn't say to him, by the way, Mr. Zaslow, the gallon of paint we're selling you is going to poison children. He bought the paint. He bought the paint. So the paint manufacturers are the problem, and there's been litigation, as you well know, up and down all over the United States. Can we hold paint manufacturers liable or not? Pennsylvania hasn't gone that way. But the paint manufacturers being the problem of lead paint, paint is the place to look to solve it. And 50 cents a gallon, we use a lot of paint. We paint these apartments month in and month out. We're big users of paint. So for us to volunteer to pay 50 cents a gallon of paint, put it in the fund, give it to Dr. Johnson, give it to the tenants groups, give a little bit to us to help our people correct it, and you can solve the problem, because eventually if you did that, this is a tax which would really go away, because eventually you would solve the lead problem, and you wouldn't have to have the tax anymore. Replace all the windows, replace all the doors, replace the friction surfaces, replace the lead pipes which go from the curb stop into the person's own property where they're living. This could be done. So I'm going to let President Harvey Spear, who has some strong feelings about our requirements to be good landlords, and I offer that testimony to you, Councilwoman, and members of the committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Mr. Spear.
Good morning, Councilwoman Brown, and good morning, Chairman Johnson. I'll be
State your
brief.
full name.
My name is
correct.
Harvey Spear. I'm president of HAPCO, and I've been president for the last couple of years. We are here to support your efforts in enforcement of this, of lead paint. Our members have been notified throughout our newsletter to comply with the regulations. We did a poll at our last executive meeting, and everybody at the desk sat there. Some of us, like me, have apartments in Center City, and I really don't have any children under 6 in my buildings. However, I give every person that comes in a form, and I explain different facets of what we have to do to get a license. And the other thing that HAPCO is really pushing for is to have licensed landlords in the city. I know it can be done. We did this in the parking business, and L&I set out, and we even gave numbers. You'd be surprised the amount of unlicensed people, even in the parking business and now in the housing industry and rental industry. So we really are pushing for enforcement from our new director at L&I. Thank you for allowing me to testify.
You're very, very welcome. I do have a question. What's the status of the effort and push in Harrisburg for any one of those members of the House or the State Senate to pick up this issue?
The status is no status and nothing.
We didn't bring it up at this point. We're bringing it up here, and I guess we'll get our coalition, which consists of all the apartment owners, to see if they want to bring it up in Harrisburg.
I'll certainly, and Councilman Johnson just stated the same, be willing to meet with you to ID that member of the House or the Senate who would be amenable, authentically interested in being a partner.
Councilman, may I ask you a question, because I don't know the answer? I always thought that this had to come from Harrisburg, but now I see that City Council feels you have the right with the sugar tax, sorry to bring that up, but the sugar tax, here just in Philadelphia, to impose that tax. So if you can impose a tax on a soda, is there any restriction to impose it for the city to impose a tax on paint? Does it have to be Harrisburg? Can the city? And I don't know the answer. I should know the answer.
That's a legal question. I would look to the lawyer on the panel to give us some guidance on that. Councilman Green?
I haven't had a chance to investigate this issue fully, but as Councilor Zaslow, you also know that I'm not aware of whether the state has occupied the field in this regard regarding taxation, if there's already any existing taxes at the state level for paint. If so, that would probably be more an item for preemption, and we probably would not be able to. But in comparison to the soda tax, although there'll be a vigorous legal discussion, anticipating in coming months through our court system whether the soda tax, it can be done at the local level or not. I believe it can be. However, I'm not, like I said, I'm not aware of any state taxes regarding paint, but if there's not, and the state has not occupied the field, that would be an opportunity at a local level.
And naturally, the whole state of Pennsylvania has the identical problem. HAPCO is a member of a statewide organization of property owners. It's all the same, Erie, Scranton, Pittsburgh, Reading, it's all the same. They all have the same problem. The state would benefit, everybody would benefit. But here in Philadelphia, you want to solve it, that's why we're here.
Yeah, and I would refer to Councilman Brown and Gim that that's an issue they may want to bring up with the city solicitor to have Richie Fader maybe do an opinion regarding if there is any preemption issues for a local tax, and as well as the opportunity, because there may have been some legislative initiatives at the state level in the past that have not moved forward.
Thank you.
And also, just to add, I think the legal challenge, at least around the sugar component, may be the tax on the distributor versus the consumer. And we're not actually taxing the consumer. We're actually taxing the distributor. They don't have to pass it down on to the consumer if they choose not to. That's more of their own choice. They can find other ways to cover their costs. And to be quite frank, I think now that you're going to have supermarkets and certain stores selling Mad Dog 2020, Wild Irish Rose, Cisco, and other type of wines, and also fine wines in the neighborhoods, they'll do more than willing to. They'll make up any proposed lost income in their process, but it will be a legal discussion around it.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'm not familiar with any of those type of beverages. I'm not saying that you do. You've probably heard about them through their aggressive advertising, or Boone's Farm, or Ripple, or any of those types of adult beverages that have been advertised in various communities. But I think it does. I think your point is well taken in reference to looking at ways that we could possibly use it, and hopefully this is an opportunity to work with HAPCO and some of the other partners statewide and determine what's the best process, because like you said, this is an issue that's not just in the city of Philadelphia, but I would venture Chester, Reading, Pittsburgh, Easton, Allentown, Bethlehem, Erie. You can rattle off the states because of the age of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and having an aging number of industrial cities and coal-based cities and those type of cities where the housing stock is probably in the 20s or 30s. More likely you have this concern of lead paint, but as well as the other issue of lead in the laterals that enter people's homes. So this could be an opportunity for a broader conversation.
Indeed.
There's a component to it as well, which I didn't mention, but I'll do it now. We all know that there's lead paint, there's lead in the sewer, in the piping, there's lead in the soil, massive lead in the soil. Where did that come from? That came from leaded gasoline. We all bought leaded gasoline. Councilman, you bought a gallon of gas for 16 cents back in 1968 or whatever it was. when she was 2 years old. Nobody told you that the exhaust out of that gasoline was going to be laying for 75 years in the playgrounds of Philadelphia. So gasoline also plays a role in this.
Sure.
And nobody wants more taxes. But the gasoline tax is so high, I don't know what it is, like 50 cents a gallon, I have no idea what it is. Could the legislature give us a penny per gallon of gasoline for a lead fund? How about a half a penny? Will they give us a half a penny in order to put it on the gasoline and put it into a fund for these people, the experts on lead paint, to have that money, monitor it, and help solve the problem?
Excellent. Okay.
Thank you. Next witness, please. State your name, record, and title. State your name and title for the record, please, in the microphone.
My name is Philip Lord. I'm the Executive Director of the Tenant Union Representative Network. And I'm here with George Gould from Community Legal Services, who's going to help answer questions. He's been working on this for a long time, and you all know him very well. I'm also here with Charlene Newting and Kim Newting, who are tenants who are been part of this problem. They did not get a lead safe certificate when they moved in. And Kim Chester and Desi Shavers are also here to answer questions. They did get a certificate, but it wasn't filed with the health department. to get a sense of the complexity of the situation here. I'm really pleased to be here with HAPCO, with Darrell and Spears, Harvey Spears, supporting this bill, because I think that's very, very important. And I agree with them fully that the problem is money. And if there's a way to get a fund together that would enable landlords to, if there's a way to provide a fund for landlords to be able to remediate properties, that would be crucial to this process. It is just too expensive for people to do voluntarily. And right now, to be honest with you, we have a voluntary program. There is no enforcement. And why do I say that? There's enforcement of some old laws in terms of lead being, if a child is already sick and the health department goes out, they will enforce the law to some degree. They don't collect money from landlords, they just make sure they do the work. Apparently, they haven't collected any fines until just a couple of years ago. So that collection doesn't happen. But they do require landlords to remediate. What doesn't happen is there's no penalty to anyone for failure to provide these lead-safe certificates. No one's ever been cited. No one's ever been... The law is very strong, as Mrs. Zaslow said. I mean, the law provides the city could fine $300 a day. It could imprison people. It does nothing. And doesn't even recognize, I believe, the fact that the certificate hasn't been given unless the child's already sick. So we're still back in the era of children having to be ill and poisoned before we do something about it, even though this law is on the books. In spite of the requests that have been made, I am not optimistic about the city's capacity to enforce this law. And that's why, and thank you, Councilwoman Brown, this law was designed in large respect to enable tenants to enforce the law. You going to ask a question, Chairman?
Yeah, let's go back. So, how, and Darrell, you can weigh in as well with Mr. Lord. Explain to me the process in which landlords receive their landlord license.
Well,
is that part of the requirement? Does the lead test have to be done in a particular apartment building or apartment unit before that person receives the rental license?
They have just, if I may, they have just changed the website. I don't know how recently it was. When you click on to get your housing inspection license, there's now a statement there that you have to click yes or no. Are you in compliance?
Oh, it's just a statement. Okay.
Yeah, well...
No one officially comes out like from L&I
no.
or the health department and says, let me do the test.
No.
Before you get this license.
No.
Okay.
The landlord has to state that he or she did or did not comply.
Well, landlords aren't going to volunteer that information if they didn't do it.
Well, they're not going to get their license then, because now you can't get the license without checking yes or no.
What I'm saying is, if no one, I don't really believe in somebody that's going to voluntarily tell the truth, just being up front with you, especially in that type of business, because your goal, you're trying to make a profit. And if nobody's coming out there to actually check and do a real inspection, right, then, yeah, you probably check yes on the check yes on the box and just move forward.
Well, I'm going to say it's time for fear of heaven upon the people who do that, Councilman. Yes. I mean, I guess you're right. When you check that box, yes or no, you're responsible to comply, and you did, or you're not responsible and didn't have to, yes or no. And you lie on that.
Because what happens is, if we're talking about lead-based paint products being used in an apartment unit, or we're talking about lead coming from the water, but after this home is built, I check yes, everything has been checked, everything is okay, and then 3-4 months later, the health department comes out, or there's some type of diagnosis that a child is suffering from some type of lead-based poisoning. Well, if you check the box that you did the inspection, is there a correlation between a young person or a child having the lead-based poisoning and you having the inspection saying that your house is lead-free?
It's perjury, Councilman, to go on a city website and apply for a license and lie about it.
Yeah.
I wanted to be clear on that part because you just mentioned there's no type of enforcement at all.
There is no enforcement. And there's incongruity there because the license is once a year. First of all, this requirement has only been a few months, so it's not like we're talking about history here.
Okay.
And the the license could be once a year. The tenant could move in the day after the license is granted, and then the landlord has to supply a certificate. So the certificate is based on moving in for the first time. The license is an annual renewal thing. It's two separate processes. And even though I appreciate the effort to relate them and notify landlords about the requirement, it doesn't work in terms of enforcement. What works, and what would work significantly, is that the law says a tenant's entitled to a refund of all their rent that they paid if they did not get a certificate. That has never been enforced, to our knowledge, okay, and there may be discussions about it in fair housing, but it's never been enforced. The courts don't ask any questions about this, and so the fact of the matter is a tenant could be evicted for non-payment who never even got the certificate. It's an outrageous situation, and so the key thing is not just let people know about the inspection requirement, but about the enforcement capacity that tenants have. Tenants have to be made aware of that. We believe, and we say in our testimony, every lease should have a clause that says if you moved in and you have a child 6 or under, and you did not get a certificate, 85 to 92% of the buildings in the Philadelphia area are estimated to have lead paint. So it's almost universally true. So if that's the case, tenants should know they can ask for a refund of rent if they didn't get the certificate. Let me tell you, 2 or 3 tenants asking for that in a high-profile way will solve the problem, because the landlord's not going to invest hundreds of dollars, $250 for an inspection, okay, a certification inspection, and potentially remediation could cost a lot more. No one's going to invest in solving this problem if no one's going to enforce it. If the city doesn't penalize anybody, if tenants don't know about it, we serve 1,000 tenants every year. They come through our classes. No one knows about this law. In the time that we've been doing this since it was passed, we've only had one person say that they got the certificate. Okay, one, okay, and that person is here today, and they never got the certificate filed with the health department. Okay. So it's just not being enforced. It's that simple. And until tenants know what their rights are, and it gets publicized, not just the requirement, but the remedies, then it's not going to be enforced.
So,
go ahead.
So let me add that that's why this hearing is so critically important, because it gives us a register reading, a measurement on where we are and where we are not. And so having this testimony is certainly going to inform our subsequent next steps, several of which have been mentioned. Thank you for that. Please.
Yeah, my name is George Gould. I'm a managing attorney at Community Legal Services. I've been involved in the lead issue
from the very beginning.
Very beginning. Actually, in 1972, I sued HUD and PHA so that they wouldn't sell properties and PHA wouldn't rent properties unless they were in compliance with the city health code. One of the things I want to mention, first, is I want to thank the committee for doing this. It's extremely important. This bill is very important to the safety of children in the city of Philadelphia, and especially I want to thank you for being the leader in getting this bill introduced.
Yes.
Unfortunately, the bill has not done what it's supposed to do for a variety of reasons. One of the reasons this bill is so important is that in Philadelphia, the way we determine whether or not there is lead in a property doesn't necessarily happen until a child gets poisoned.
Right.
They then go to a doctor. The doctor then sends to the health department the fact that a kid is poisoned, and the health department goes out and inspects the property. The importance of this law is it is now preventative. What it does is supposedly prevent a child from going into a property unless the property is lead safe. I think enforcement is critical. There are substantial fines, as Darrell Zaslow mentioned, that can be imposed upon landlords who do not comply. And I think if the health department and L&I went after some landlords and imposed substantial fines, I think there could be a real turnaround in the city. The fine is $2,000 a day for every day that the violation has been in existence. So it's really important that this ordinance work. The numbers that Darrell Zaslow mentioned were somewhat interesting, but I think there still are a substantial number of children who are moving into properties and the parents are not receiving the certification that the property is lead safe. And I think what the health department has to do and L&I has to do, and there are ways of doing it, and Darrell Zaslow of finding out, where there are tenants and actually going out and determining whether or not a lead-safe certification was issued. That's what has to happen. There has to be enforcement. There has to be publicity so tenants are aware of it and landlords are aware of it. And landlords are aware that there is a severe penalty if they don't comply. You know, when this law was passed, I got emails from around the country
Is that right?
saying how good this is, and Philadelphia is really in the forefront of doing some real lead poisoning prevention for children. And I just think this hearing is real important, and things need to be done aggressively
Yes.
to make sure that these certifications are being issued.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you for that, very, very much. It simply underscores we still have a lot to do. Thank you so much. So, we'll move to the next panel, if that's okay, and if there's anyone else who would like to testify, I would like to call up L&I. I think it's important for us to have testimony after our next panel. Please, you're welcome to move to the witness table and give us your full name and offer your testimony. No problem. We prefer that you do that at the witness table.
Is that okay? I ask a question?
Please have a seat. Please have a seat, and can I state your full names for the record and provide your testimony or raise the question you might have.
My name is Charlene Newting. We're going through quite a bit with our landlord.
Please pull the mic closer.
I'm sorry.
No problem.
My voice is low. You did bring up a very good question, and that is my question. Our landlord left their license lapse from years and years and years ago, and when we started going through issues with the landlord, he apparently went on to the website and filled out that form, and he simply checked off yes, 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 and knowingly, he knows that I have sent him pictures from a plumber and from someone that works at L&I, took down the drain, that the sewer pipes out front are busted. The windows have never been replaced since the house has been built. You put them up and down, you get the dust from the lead.
Right.
I have small grandchildren in the house. They have been born there.
Wow.
So we're not only talking about children 6 and under, I mean, children who have turned 7, you know, they have to be tested. But she was in utero with these babies, and they were born there, okay? Now, he went on this website and just checked yes, 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 and honor, and we take that. We sit back as citizens and take that and say, okay, he said yes, so it's okay. No one came out to my home and looked around and swabbed. No one came out to my home and checked the broken concrete. No one came out to my home when he renewed his license
I see.
and checked anything.
Well, yours is a classic example, so I'm going to...
Our sidewalks are busted, our steps are falling apart, the
Yes.
windows, he replaced windows and never replaced the wood around the windows.
Okay.
So it's old chip painted wood around the windows, and has the nerve to get arrogant with me if I ask a question. If I say a sewer pipe is busted, I have to pay a plumber, he won't come out.
Well-
He wants to make it my issue.
I appreciate you showing up today and registering your concern directly with us, because we have the 2 departments here today that we want you to sit with and confer with so that they can get your exact address and the name of the landlord. It sounds like, based on the information I've heard, your landlord is subject to a violation here. So I
He
want
went and
you to-
renewed, once he realized he was in, I don't want to go into full everything, but he was in jeopardy with the house.
Very well. Well,
He went and filed for a new license.
Well, we're going to do the homework and see if the follow-through has happened. So I'm going to lean on the Department of Health representative and the Department of L&I to meet with you before they leave for the follow-through to happen with regards to your landlord.
We also have the concern, my oldest granddaughter was 6 when we moved in the house, and she's autistic. What effect is this having on her? I mean, what effect is it having on the 2-month-old baby?
Yeah.
We don't know, and it may not show until...
Far later down the line when the academic
Exactly, and they could be
behavior
over 6 years old at that point
revealed.
when it shows.
We understand fully, which simply underscores the purpose and
Exactly.
value of this hearing. We thank you for your courage to show up this morning.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
If we have to speak to anyone, we're going to have to be going because she's
Okay, well, you
getting
can
to
do
nap
that
time.
now with Department of Health is here and L&I is here. Let's do that now.
We thank
Let's seize the
everybody
moment.
because she's been excellent so
Okay.
far, but it's getting to be nap time.
Let me hear from the other witness. Please state your full name for the record.
My name is Kim Chester Shavers, and my issue is, when we moved in, we literally had a tree in our home. It took them 3 months to get it out. But as we make ice and water, we taste the minerals. We buy 7 cases of water a month. We don't use it for ice. We use ice. We pour water and ice. We don't use our faucet to eat or cook with.
And this is a rental property?
Yes, and I know one day we went to Home Depot and they was giving out these things to check your water.
Sure.
They sent me a letter immediately. They said it was going to wait 3 to 6 weeks. They sent me a letter immediately. They told me do not drink their water again and do not give it to your children. If I say something to my landlord, you got to get put out. But then they did give me the paper stating that they've been tested for lead. Why would these people send that to us?
Well, let me respond in a couple of ways. One, we want to get your contact information because I think your testimony will be of value when we have our hearings on lead and water. So
Yes.
that's the one thing we want to do. And secondly, I'd like you also to connect with the Department of Health, who is here this morning, and the Department of L&I, who's
I already
here.
did L&I. They don't do nothing. They don't do nothing to the landlords.
So we're gonna dwell in the realm of possibility. I also want you to meet with my staff, and Community Legal Services is here. Between the 3 offices, we should be able to make a small difference in your circumstance.
Okay.
Okay, so my
Thank
staff will get your information, Department of Health will get your information, and Department of L&I.
Because my child
will get
got
your information.
autistic. He's in the spectrum.
I see.
He got ADHD. He got another H something. He got everything going on, so we gotta watch what he do,
Of
you know?
course.
Because he already affected, but I can't say it's from the lead, but I don't want it to get worse.
Of course. Sir, you have testimony
you.
you'd like to offer?
For the record, my name is Desi Shavers. She already said it, so, you know what I mean, that he was autistic.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, then. We've heard from everyone except L&I. We want to move along because we have a 1 o'clock hearing and a presentation that needs to take place in 10 minutes. So we want to give everybody an opportunity to be on the record. So if L&I can move forward to the table quickly.
Grab their addresses first.
Forgive me?
I was going to grab their addresses first.
That's more important. Can my staff assist, please, in getting the address of these 2 families? Okay. Anyone here to offer testimony on this resolution? Resolution on the implementation of Bill number 100011. Thank you very much. So we will recess this hearing on this particular bill. We will reread the testimony, pull out the recommendations that have been offered by all of the testifiers, speak with a member of the House and the Senate to see who might be amenable to the recommendation offered by HAPCO after we get a city solicitor's opinion on whether or not we can even proceed in that direction. But we want to thank you all for showing up and for bringing families that have actually been badly, negatively impacted by the, I would say, weak enforcement of this legislation. Thank you all for your testimony. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Calm down.
All right.
I agree. levy is not regulated.